More question. There we go. So I'm very excited just to hear from you what the course has been like, what your sort of experience both at Warwick and as a Fulbrighter in the current constellation of the Fulbright program has been. When I was creating the Planet Purple posting for this, I saw the what they call it, the everything has to be everything has to be silicon. So the silicon spa that they've turned
Mhm.
into the silicon spa. And I was actually speaking to a student who knows whether or not it'll turn out that he pops in later or not. Someone who was very much from the mathematical modeling finance
Mhm.
world, which, as you probably recall, my nephew who did his undergraduate and graduate degrees at Warwick is very much of that world. So I've just been wondering how AI is filtering into curriculum as well as the political economy roots and so forth of the program. So with that, as my bated breath, please share what you are willing.
Yeah, absolutely. What's crazy, I hadn't actually even heard the term silicon spa until you put it in the title, and then I
Uh-huh.
went and looked it up and learned all about it. Yeah, I mean, AI is everywhere right now. It's such a big subject of discussion, and I think especially in the UK, it's been the type of thing where with the growth agenda from the current administration, AI feels like the hot new thing. Like
Right.
how can we hook on to this? I think at universities, at least rather at Warwick, and I've heard this from some of the other Fulbrighters, AI has been less I think we've been slow to adapt to it and slow to
Okay.
fit into our curriculums, and it's very departmental and discipline specific. So, for example, in politics and international studies at Warwick, they have a lot of the department is very theory, very philosophy heavy, less into the quantitative sciences. And they really push back against any AI use, and they want you thinking and not getting into it. I take coursework in another department, the Center for Interdisciplinary Methods at work, and they love it. They basically, I had a professor tell me a few weeks ago, he said, I assume you're using AI to write your papers, to do your work. Like, I assume you're basically cheating. So I design my assignments with that in mind, where, I really value coming up with creative new ideas and kind of hitting the points that AI can't hit and learning how to use it as a tool. That's a
Mhm.
big push from him. And it's very interesting because I'm writing papers that I never really would have in undergrad. I'm writing in a very different style than I would in that class, and it's kind of forcing you to engage with these new models. So within coursework, it's been very very interesting to see how it plays out.
So I'm curious when you talk about the different style. I mean, even back in the dark ages when I was in the UK, just academic writing tended to have some different stylistic expectations in the UK versus the US. The US, it was, passive voice got you practically
Mhm.
smacked across the face in the US, and in the UK, they had no problem with it. Probably,
Yeah.
So I'm curious what I'd love to probe a bit more. Like, what does that mean? What feels so different about the writing in the UK?
Yeah, so that has been one of the biggest points of adjustment, I'd say. Exactly what you said. The style of writing is a little more, how do I put this? A little longer, a little more, desire to be sound very smart and eloquent and maybe less concise and um, more flowery, I guess. And so for PACE, we write 5,000 word papers for our term papers very often. And it's been interesting because professors will always say 5,000 words. It's a very small amount of space. You can't say a lot in that. And
Yeah.
I think 5,000 words, that's so much. I could say so many different things in that. I mean, that's a crazy amount of space. I think one of the big things they really push for here is, especially in political science, a big basis in theory. And obviously in the US, you always have to base your models or whatever you're doing in theory. But in my head, it's typically, you write your literature review and then you move on to what you're going to say. And in my courses here, they really push me to show I've engaged with all of the literature in an area and kind of present it out for the reader so that they know everything that's going on. So in a 5,000 word essay, I maybe spend 2,000 or to 2,500 words, depending on what the course is, really just focusing on engaging with it and hitting all of the different nodes and branches to be able to present this very fully formed argument. So maybe less concise and to the point, but much more built out, I guess. That's at least on the politics side of things, I'd say.
That's it. It's interesting that that remains. Some things remain constant, and particularly when you're talking about having your sort of two intellectual homes, the politics department and then the interdisciplinary studies one. Is there a sense in which the cohorts in those two places are different? Does that sort of capture to your mind the way folks engage at the university, or do you have other places in the university where your social life exists and those are more limited to your academic engagements?
Hmm. So I'd say, the thing I didn't know coming in is politics in the UK is they do a very philosophy approach to politics. Even in Warwick, which is known for being a pretty good quantitative department, there's a lot of methodological, division between the quant people in the department and the theory people. And the theory people don't want more quant infringing on them. Versus in like the Center for Interdisciplinary Methods, they are AI focused, data focused. Like they see
Okay.
the theory type stuff happening in politics and they're like, what the heck is this? Why are we just
Right.
going on and on? And maybe I fall more to the quant side as a quant person in the department. Within the students, you definitely see a big difference because politics people, I'd say, really like to think about things from big, grand theories of how the world works or how people behave, and they're very focused on deriving things from these very fluid arguments saying, starting from point A and working through to point B to develop arguments about, whatever it is, development or comparative politics. The people in the interdisciplinary methods, the AI data science space, they really like to use cool tools and prove things using cool tools and cool technology. So they love to jump on whatever the newest piece of AI is, the newest model, and play around with it and see what they can create from that. And I think what's been cool about maybe being at the intersection of those is you can see the benefits from each approach. Like cool tools have a really good place in statistics and data science, but the politics approach of like basing that in strong theory, I think
Mhm.
is very important and maybe left out a little bit when we get into some of these, modeling approaches and things like that. So I guess that's the academic side of it. I can touch on the social side too, if you'd like.
No, I'd love to hear about that, both in terms of where you find yourself spending your time within and around Warwick, and also what the contacts are with your Fulbright cohort.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'd say within and around Warwick, I have a few different communities. Obviously, politics. I've really found a home there in the department, and that's where a lot of my close friends are. I think, the thing is when you take a bunch of politics kids and then put them in the pub, they are going to have a great time and continue talking about politics all night. And especially as like the American representative with, some of the various global events going on recently, there's always
Yeah.
something to speak for, especially in the politics department at work too. Our cohort, I'd say over 50% of the MA program is not from the UK. So
Okay.
we have so many different, like I genuinely think at the pub last week, we might have had 6 or 7 different countries represented in a group of 10 people, which is a pretty unique and cool experience to be able to have that around campus.
Yeah.
So that's been a big source of community at work. I've also found community through, a few extracurriculars. I'm pretty involved with climbing here. I'm pretty involved with the Warwick Discourse Society, which kind of fits into the politics background. And then I try to get involved with various nature-forward organizations around campus. So I think that's helpful for branching out of the politics space, meeting people just
So
all
where
across.
have you been climbing?
So Warwick has a huge climbing gym on campus, which I did not know about before coming
Oh,
here.
cool.
But it is massive. I mean, it's really it's state of the art, and it's very nice to kind of fit into the week. It feels like you're working out, but it's a fun thing to do. And then around here, I'm planning in late May. There's a trip to District to do outdoor climbing there. And I've never been outdoor climbing before, but it's for beginners. They're going to set aside all
Uh-huh.
harnesses. So I'm very excited for that.
And the Peak District is gorgeous and it has gorgeous pubs. So after you're done climbing, I'm sure you'll also have a good time.
Exactly.
That's and yeah, where have your, speaking of sort of excursions, where have your Fulbright retreats been this year?
So we did Birmingham for orientation. We're doing Forum in London next week. And
Okay.
then debrief is going to be at Durham. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Good climbing in Durham, I would expect. Um, and that's the first time that I've heard those labels, particularly the forum label used. So talk about what's the nature of the forum for the UK Fulbrighters.
So Forum, we're also slightly fuzzy on what Forum actually represents at the moment. Forum is next week. So generally the idea behind it we think is kind of just another community event for the Fulbrighters.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of the programming going on are community focused. So we have a private tour of the British Library, which we're really excited for. We have a tour of the V&A, which should be really cool. We have a session. So Forum is hosted by one Fulbrighters university, and that Fulbrighter typically hosts the session. So Ramsden, who is at one of the theater schools in London, he's the host
Okay.
for this. So we're going to do a session with a an academic there on the role of AI and technology in the arts right now. So it's a lot of those types of things, very similar to orientation. I think one thing that'll be new is all of the scholars, so the older Fulbrighters,
Oh, okay. They're
are
going to join you.
yes, and at orientation, a lot of the scholars come in later in the year. So we only had three of them at orientation, but I think we'll have 12 or 15 next week. So it should be fun to hear how all of their experiences have been.
So I'm surprised because and this is on me, I had thought that,
Oh, did I lose you? Can you hear me?
you're back, you're back.
Okay,
It's
sorry.
so it does, it's sending me nice messages about my unstable internet. And you keep freezing, but I hope we've gotten some good material so far, and I'm going to keep going because I want to have a conversation before the tech dies. So I had thought that the mid-year one was sort of more mid, it was like January or February. I hadn't expected it to be in after sort of spring has well and truly sprung. I just remember 1 years ago where it was in Cardiff, and then everybody learned how to do traditional Welsh dancing that looked rather like square dancing at it. So beware, there may be anything involved. And what was so in the I was also used to orientation being in London. What was orientation in Birmingham like?
Orientation in Birmingham was great. I think, I mean, Birmingham, obviously a cool city, but I think the coolest part is you get to meet all of the other Fulbrighters before you're sent off into the UK. And what I didn't necessarily realize, I mean, Fulbright works really hard to have a very diverse cohort in terms of demographics, but also the everyone's academic backgrounds are so diverse. So you're sitting in between breaks in orientation programming, talking to the Fulbrighters specializing in infectious disease, then someone who's doing creative writing and working on their manuscript, then the other politics Fulbrighter, then someone who's doing medicine, and you get to talk to so many interesting people doing so many cool things and who are so passionate about it. So we had a lot of fun, kind of like bouncing around, having our mini conversations at orientation. And then it makes it really nice for when you're sent off into the middle of the UK, into, Coventry or Birmingham or wherever you're going.
Yeah.
You don't really know anyone. You have all of these strings connecting you to other places. So, I go to Leicester a decent amount because I have a friend there, and I have a friend up in Manchester, and kind of wherever I go in the UK, I at minimum have someone to get coffee with, but often have a couch to sleep on or just a friendly face. It really makes you feel a lot more supported going into the year, I think.
Nice. That's what we always hope, but
Mhm.
and that's the theory, but it's always good to hear that it's functioning in practice. You didn't happen to go to a pub called the Old Swan in Dudley while you were in Birmingham, did you?
I can't say I did. However, all the British pub names tend to blend together.
Well, it probably would have stuck because it would have said Ma Pardo's home brew on it, and maybe the name would have rung a bell. But sadly, I think it's finally closing down. It was my husband's grandmother's pub. Anyway, um, so the it sounds like you've been traveling around the center of the country, popping around Manchester and Leicester and Birmingham. Have you had the sort of time between term breaks or on long weekends to venture farther afield?
Yes, I feel like I've been able to make it to across the UK and a little bit outside the UK this year. I was up in Belfast for my term break a while back in the middle. That was an amazing trip, maybe as a politics person too, a very interesting history, a very sad history, but it's a very, I think, cool spot to
Yeah,
visit. And it's cool to see where Belfast is at right now versus, where it was 30 years ago.
yeah.
Um, I've made it up to Edinburgh and some parts of Scotland. And then I did make it over to Dublin a few months ago. So left the UK or left went to Ireland. And then I was just in Poland last week with my dad outside of the UK a little bit. So I'm
Oh,
trying to work my
cool.
way around.
That's well, so I was curious whether with your rock climbers you'd eventually find yourself in doing rock climbing in Wales because the I think that would be faster probably than getting to Scotland, and also the nature of the mountains might be better, but
Mhm.
you'll have to let me know. So, the other thing that folks always ask us about, and so I will ask you in my attempting to channel an interested undergraduate, is what you're currently thinking about after Fulbright.
Mhm.
And frankly, if you also have insight from other members of your cohort, like what the general thought is in terms of at the conclusion, whether folks are thinking about returning to the States, whether they're taking advantage of the visa to, work in the UK, whatever.
hmm Yeah, I'd say it's very mixed. The biggest consistent thing, you see a lot of people going to academia after this, a lot of people going off for PhDs in the US, some people staying in the UK for PhDs. I'd say for me, and then in terms of the US and UK, you really do see a 50-50 split. I'd
Okay.
say generally, people who stay in the UK tend to go to London, even if you're outside of it, it kind of feeds into there, with the exception of people who are doing a PhD, who have more years at their university.
Right.
For me, after this year, I think the big takeaway I got from this year is I'm not sure about doing a PhD, and I had really come into this year thinking that was probably going to be my long-term fit. So that maybe has opened things, or I guess not closed a door, but shut a door a little bit and pushed me in other directions. I think in the space I want to work in, which is politics and rather being in, political research or being in the policy space, going back to the US and going back to DC makes sense for me.
Uh,
That being said, I love London and hope to make it back here at some point. I think one of the nice things about Fulbright that a lot of people talk about is just being here already and having connections through Fulbright or your university makes it easy to stay in the UK. It makes it easy to go back to the US and come back to the UK in a few years. Like it kind of builds up that network for you so that you're able to do it at any time that makes sense for you. And I've heard that people, even if they have if they don't use the graduate visa right now, they've found ways to make it back into the UK in a
oh,
few years.
interesting.
Um, I've heard that Fulbright makes it kind of flexible on that down the road.
That's interesting. That was something that I thought had a firmer timeline on it. And so last but not least, everybody always wants to know what do you wish you had known before you set off or even before you applied, sort of retrospectively, and so that as folks are thinking about this in the future, they can direct their research and we in the office can direct our advising to try to plug those holes in future experience.
Let's see. I mean, to be fair, the advice you and Steve give from the Office of Fellowships is amazing. Like, you guys really do a great job in the applications. So I'll try to give things that maybe I didn't hear from you guys. I'd say from the student perspective, one of the hardest things I think in the application process is that if you're doing it the way you probably should, you have like a million people reading your essays. You have, your three recommenders. You have people in the Office of Fellowships. You have friends and family. You could have like 10 people reading things. And oftentimes that means you're getting a lot of different contradictory advice and a lot of people pushing you in different directions. And I think the big thing that I kind of figured out near the end and wish I knew earlier was that like, you have to be the arbiter of your Fulbright application. You're the one doing it at the end of the day. And so like having that awareness to be able to say, no to when one professor gives you certain advice and pick and choose what makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my Fulbright faculty advisor told me not to apply to the UK after he read my initial videos. And so I'm glad I didn't listen to that advice. But I remember at one point, Steve gave me one piece of advice, and my professor, I remember I looked at their emails side by side, and they're the exact opposite thing. I went with Steve's advice, I remember. But so I think that.
Yeah. I'm biased as the director of the Office of Fellowships, but that's where I'd say it's a very particular, yeah, it's a very
Mhm.
particular, but we're very aware that, and that's knowing, okay, is this something where the faculty member's expertise is lending a particular view that I nod towards that, or is this something that's really about how one presents in this particular context of Fulbright, and therefore it should be, Steve Hill's going to have more experience with that genre, and that's difficult, and it's yours, and that's it. You need
Mhm.
to be whatever you write, you want to make sure that it's it what you believe, what you think, and what you can defend when you get into that interview, should that take place. So,
Yeah.
but and so the other thing is just we've collected these videos over the years, when we get folks at new and different universities from before, in part because we also want to know what you perhaps wish you'd known about Warwick in particular that you didn't, that now that we've got somebody in Warwick, we can record for posterity, sort of here are the sort of peculiarities, good or bad, about Warwick that maybe I wish I'd known when I first got here that you've learned over the course of your time.
Mhm. I'd say, there's a few different pieces. So I'd say in terms of the student perspective of learning about work, one thing I've had multiple people do this year is reach out to me as the current Fulbrighter and ask, like,
So
tell
that's
me about
interesting.
Warwick Pace. And I always respond to those emails, and knowing other Fulbrighters, they respond as well. So I kind of wish I had done that sort of thing
Okay.
before. and just understood the intricacies of UK politics departments or UK universities, because I think I could have had a better understanding of what was out there in the UK. And I'm not saying I would have picked a different university, but I think I would have better understood what the dynamic is
Right.
at University of Warwick. I think Warwick specific things to note is that I mean, Warwick is not really in Coventry. We are very much our own secluded university, and I think it's almost in the same way like University of Chicago is on the south side of Chicago, but it's a very, different thing than maybe other parts of the south side. And Warwick
Right.
necessarily um, very integrated with Coventry. There's very much a separation between the two, and it can make it
So they
hard.
claim I mean, they've always described themselves as being sort of the UK's only campus university, and I haven't
Yeah,
been there myself. So one of the things I've always been curious is, does that feel like the right term to you? Or does
I
it
think
not meet that sense of a campus feel from a US perspective?
I think that's spot on. Like you could live your entire life on the Warwick campus. You could get your groceries, you could go to your doctor, you could go to the pub, you could spend your entire social life there
Okay.
very, very easily. And while a lot of students move off campus to Leamington Spa in their second and third year, it is very much a university style campus, like a city camp or a campus university.
Oh. And how long does it take to get to Leamington Spa? Because when my nephew was there, I started associating Warwick more, the University of Warwick, more with Leamington Spa than I did with Warwick, the city, or Coventry, the city, because I heard a lot about Leamington Spa.
It takes about 20 minutes if you catch the bus. The big thing
Okay.
is these buses are like overflowing with people all trying to get to campus at the same time. So if you take
Right.
the first one, but yeah, I mean that really is Leamington is much more a heart of the work community than downtown or central Coventry is. Really,
Okay.
it's mostly students not from the UK who live in central Coventry. I live closer to campus, so I'm kind of in an in-between. But
Okay.
Leamington is where you'll see a lot of students running around.
And is it a tech hub? Like if you ride into Leamington now, are you seeing sort of glass and steel innovation center buildings the way you do in research triangles in the States, or is that an aspiration rather than a reality?
I think aspiration is probably a better way to put
Okay.
it. Yeah, I
Okay.
think Leamington really looks like a traditional British village or city when you walk in there.
Because I thought of it as being more a pretty old, I mean, I haven't been there, but I always had it in my mind's eye of sort of a 19th century resort town,
Hmm.
rather than being a place that would become a tech hub. But as I say, ran across this Silicon Spa language. I was like, well, I suppose that might be time that they're willing to do it.
Yeah, and maybe 10 years from now it'll suddenly be popping up with like Google and all of these big companies. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's well. Thank you very much for this. I'm going to stop recording